Welcome back to my channel, Revenge with Melissa.
My mother rolled down her car window, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "I bet $50 you can't even find your way home." Then she drove away. I was 12 years old. Standing alone in the middle of Union Station, Chicago. $9 in my pocket. No phone. No address. A city the size of a planet pressing in on all sides. And she laughed as she did it. Now, 20 years later, I'm standing outside the hospital room where she's dying, reading a court document that confirms she also secretly drained a $50,000 inheritance that was legally mine. Money my grandmother left specifically for me, not my sister, not my parents, me. So here is what I did about it. And I promise you, by the end of this, the phrase karma is a full circle is going to hit completely different. Let me set the scene. My name is Sophia. I'm 32 years old. I'm a graphic designer in Denver, Colorado. I have a husband named Alex, a rescue dog named Max with one torn ear, and a life so deliberately, carefully, intentionally built that most mornings I have to remind myself it's actually mine. But it wasn't always this clean. I grew up in Willow Creek, Illinois, small town, big appearances. My parents owned a small chain of home goods stores. Kitchen mixers, bedding, discount coffee makers. The kind of shops that looked like ambition from the outside. My father grilled on weekends. My mother waved at neighbors. To everyone in that town, we were the portrait of a respectable, hard-working American family. Inside the house? Different story. Inside the house, love had conditions. Safety had conditions. Even existing quietly without drawing attention had conditions. My mother had a little sister, Hannah, who was 4 years younger than me. And if you know anything about toxic family dynamics, you already know where this is going. Hannah was the golden child. Hannah's drawings went on the fridge. Mine went in the trash. Hannah's B- on a spelling test got celebrated over dinner. My B+ in art, the one subject I actually lived for, got me a lecture about laziness and moral failure. That's the exact phrase my mother used. Moral failure. For a B+. In art class. I was the scapegoat. The experiment. The child my parents used to test theories about toughening kids up. They called it parenting. Can you believe the audacity? Here's where you need to understand something about my parents. They were not the explosive, screaming type. That would have been almost easier to name. No, they were calculated. They smiled while they did it. They used words like resilience and character and preparing you for the real world as cover for what was, looking back, a very deliberate pattern of cruelty. When I was 8, I asked for new sneakers at the mall because mine were splitting at the toes. My mother told me I was being spoiled, marched me to a bench by the food court, and left me there for 3 hours. When she and my father finally came back, he asked her if she owed him $20, because he had bet on whether I'd still be sitting in the same spot. I was 8 years old. When I was 10, I cried after some boys mocked me in a parking lot after a football game. Instead of comforting me, my parents drove to the far side of the lot, told me to get out, and left me there after dark. They came back nearly an hour later with fast food for themselves and zero apology. My father thought it was hilarious. He said he'd bet I'd try to hitch a ride. Everything was a bet. Everything was a test. Everything was a performance where I was the punchline and they were the audience. I was shaking with rage just writing that. And now I have to tell you about the train station. After my B+ report card, the night I overheard them whispering in the kitchen, voices low, amused in that particular way that always made my stomach drop. My mother said I needed a lesson I would never forget. My father said he'd bet money on it. 30 became 45. An hour in, my chest started hurting. An hour and a half in, my hands were shaking. $9. No phone. A city I'd never navigated alone. And I still kept rushing back to that pillar because they told me not to move, and some part of my 12-year-old brain still believed following the rules would protect me. Then I saw the car moving slowly past the glass windows outside. I ran toward the entrance, waving both arms, and for one split second I thought they'd come back. My father was driving. My mother was in the passenger seat. Both of them were looking directly at me. My father smiled. Not the smile of relief. The smile of someone watching a punchline land exactly right. My mother rolled down the window and leaned out just enough for me to hear her over the traffic. I bet $50 you can't even find your way home. Then the car moved. And she laughed. And he laughed with her. And that was the moment I understood, my fear was never a side effect of what they were doing. My fear was the point. A station employee named Maria found me wandering the same row of seats for the third time. She had tired eyes and a calm voice that made you want to tell the truth even when you were scared. She asked how long I'd been waiting. I said I didn't know. She asked if I'd eaten. And that was the question that finally broke me open. Security. Transit police. Cameras confirming the car that slowed by the curb. My parents reached by phone. The officer's face going from cautious professionalism to open disbelief in about 10 seconds. And then, the words that changed everything. No, ma'am. Leaving a 12-year-old in a major transit station is not a lesson in independence. It is child abandonment. My parents showed up in family court with a lawyer and the exact same attitude they'd always had at home. Calm. Offended. Slightly amused that anyone was taking this seriously. My mother wore a navy blazer and pearl earrings like looking respectable would erase what she'd done. My father sat back with his arms crossed like this was an inconvenience he'd eventually outlast. They didn't deny it. They admitted leaving me there. They just insisted it had been educational. When the judge asked if I wanted to return home, I said no so fast it seemed to shock even me. My mother stared at me like I'd slapped her. My father muttered something about ingratitude. The judge did not flinch. My parents were given a choice: commit to a 2-year reunification program with oversight and therapy, or voluntarily surrender their parental rights. They chose surrender. To protect their pride, they handed me over. And that truth, that specific truth, is the one I carried the longest. I was placed with Mark and Laura Bennett. A photographer with ink-stained fingers and a preschool teacher who smelled like lotion and classroom paper. A warm, cluttered house with a lamp in the entryway and a dog bed in the corner. They asked if I wanted the hall light on or off before bed and didn't make fun of me for not knowing. The adoption was finalized. I changed my name. Jennifer Caldwell, the girl who'd stood in a train station with $9, stayed behind. Sophia Bennett walked forward. I rebuilt everything. Art school in Chicago. A job in Denver. My own studio. A husband who, when I finally told him about Union Station, didn't interrupt, didn't give me some lazy line about everything happening for a reason. He just reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "That should never have happened to you." That was enough. Now. Fast forward to last year. My grandmother, my biological grandmother, my mother's mother, passed away. I didn't go to the funeral. I was done with that family. But a few weeks later, an estate attorney I had never heard of sent me a certified letter. My grandmother had left me $50,000. Specifically. Intentionally. My name on the document, not my parents', not Hannah's. Mine. I was stunned. And honestly, moved. Because somewhere underneath all of this, underneath the blazers and the bets and the cruelty, one person in that family had seen me. But when the attorney began tracing the disbursement trail, they found something wrong. The funds had already moved. 2 years before my grandmother died, while she was in cognitive decline, my mother had been named her financial power of attorney. And during that window, she had systematically redirected liquid assets, including the accounts earmarked for my inheritance, into the family business accounts. Accounts that, by the time the stores collapsed, had been spent. My $50,000. Gone. Can you believe the audacity? Even now. Even after everything. I was shaking. Not crying, shaking. The cold, clarifying kind of rage that makes you very, very still. Here's the part where I tell you I handled this emotionally. I did not handle this emotionally. I called a probate and estate attorney within 48 hours. I sent them everything, the original will, the power of attorney documents, the financial trail the estate attorney had already started building. My attorney requested a full forensic accounting of the accounts my mother had controlled during my grandmother's cognitive decline. What came back was ugly. It wasn't just the $50,000. There were other transfers, to the store accounts, to a personal savings account in my mother's name, even small amounts to Hannah's education fund during those years. My attorney was very clear, this was not careless accounting. This was financial elder abuse and estate fraud. Both of which are criminal offenses in Illinois. We filed a civil claim for recovery of the misappropriated funds, with interest. My attorney also contacted the county DA's office with the forensic documentation, who opened a separate criminal inquiry. Now here's where it gets really good. Remember how I mentioned Willow Creek had turned on my parents? How a Facebook comment my mother left on someone else's parenting post had cracked open 20 years of secrets? How old neighbors, a retired court clerk, a former employee had all started talking. My attorney filed the civil lawsuit in public record. Within a week, a local reporter in Willow Creek, who had been quietly following the family's fall from grace already, picked it up. The story ran with the headline, "Local Business Family Faces Fraud Allegations After Years of Controversy." It named the stores. It referenced the decades-old custody case. It mentioned the estate claim. The last 2 stores they'd been limping along on? The suppliers they still had relationships with? The small loan one of my father's old friends had extended them? Gone. All of it. Gone within a month. My mother called me 17 times the week the article ran. I watched every single call ring out. I did not block her. I wanted her to know I was choosing not to answer. There's a difference. My sister Hannah, who had already cut contact herself after reading the original court records, sent me a message. It just said, "I'm sorry I didn't find out sooner. I believe you. All of it." That was the message that made me cry. Not rage cry. The other kind. A few months into the legal process, Hannah called me. She told me our mother had late-stage cancer. Our father had suffered a mild stroke. They were living in a subsidized apartment outside Willow Creek. No house, no stores, no standing, no version of the family they'd spent decades performing for anyone. And they wanted me to come back. Not because they'd changed. Not because accountability had finally arrived. Because they were out of options and terrified of dying alone. Hannah said, "I wanted you to hear it from someone who's not lying to you." My husband said I owed them nothing. Laura told me whatever I chose, it had to be for my peace, not their comfort. Mark said, very quietly, "Some people only look for the bridge after they've burned the house down." I sat with that all night. By morning I knew, I wasn't going back to save them. I was going back to end it in my own voice. I flew into Chicago. Drove to the hospital. The room smelled like disinfectant and stale fear. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Illness and disgrace had stripped away the performance. My mother still had her face arranged somehow. Even half sick. Like dignity was something she could apply like lipstick. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then she started crying before I'd even sat down. The kind of crying designed to pull focus. She said my name. My old name. I corrected her. Once. Calmly. "Sophia." She nodded. My father said they'd made mistakes. Mistakes. I looked at him and said, "A mistake is missing an exit. A mistake is forgetting milk at the store. What you did, what both of you did, was deliberate. You left a 12-year-old girl in a train station in a city she didn't know. You laughed while she panicked. You spent 20 years lying about it to protect yourselves. And then, while your own mother was losing her mind, you stole the one thing she tried to leave me." My mother asked if I could forgive them. I told her, "Forgiveness is not a debt I owe to people who only come looking for me when their own lives fall apart." My father started to speak, probably to explain, to soften, and I held up one hand. I had not come all that way to listen to another defense wrapped in nicer language. I said the sentence I'd been carrying in some form since I was 12 years old, standing at that pillar in Union Station. "You bet $50 I couldn't find my way home." I did. "I just didn't come back to yours." They both cried. For once, their tears did not move me. I told them I would not be managing care, paying bills, or restoring contact. I told them Hannah had every right to protect her own child from them. I told them my family was in Colorado and in Illinois, with the people who had actually earned that word. My father asked if this was really goodbye. I looked at him and said, "It's been goodbye for 20 years. You're just the last ones to understand that." I walked out in 20 minutes. Didn't look back. In the parking lot, the air felt thin and bright. My hands were shaking, not from regret. From release. From the strange, quiet feeling of something that's been haunting you finally having a shape you can leave behind. The civil case settled. Not everything, the money was largely gone and the stores were shuttered, but my attorney recovered a portion from an account that had been transferred just before the business collapsed. Legal fees ate some of it. What was left, I put toward a piece of equipment for my studio. The criminal inquiry is still open. I've been told not to expect miracles. But the record exists. The truth is documented. And in a small town, documentation has a long memory. Hannah and I talk regularly now. She's a good mother. Her little boy has no idea any of this ever happened, and I plan to keep it that way for as long as possible. Max the rescue dog is currently asleep on the couch behind me. Alex made dinner. Laura called this morning just to check in. Mark texted me a photo of a new print he developed, said it reminded him of one of my old sketchbook drawings. My life is quiet. Deliberately, carefully, intentionally quiet. And if you take anything from this, anything at all, let it be this. Abuse does not become discipline because a parent uses cleaner words for it. Humiliation does not build character. Fear does not make children stronger. It only makes them older before their time. Walking away from people who hurt you, even if they share your blood, is not bitterness. Sometimes it is the healthiest thing you will ever do. The little girl who stood at that pillar with $9 in her pocket. She deserved better. And she found it. So can you.